Welcome back to So You Really Want to Learn Latin, and today we are going to be having a look at longer passages of Latin for translation. And while we're at it, we're just going to have a little look at a tense that we might, I suppose, call the simple past. Okay, now in Latin so far we've learnt four tenses: present, future, imperfect and perfect. So if we look at those two past tenses, the imperfect tense we translate as I was loving, you were loving, he, she or it was loving. Okay, the imperfect tense. And the perfect tense, amar we translate as I have loved, you have loved, he, she or it has loved. Okay, so those two tenses are clearly distinct. One is what you were doing. I was loving, I was swimming, I was sailing. And the other is what you have done. I have loved, I have swum, I have sailed. But there's another tense that we often use in English, which we can call the simple past, which is where you say, I swam, or I ate, or I fought, or I ran. Okay? Now, Latin didn't have a different tense for that. Greek did. Greek had a tense called the aorist. Latin didn't. So when you are dealing with the simple past in Latin, we have to make do either with the imperfect tense or with the perfect, and just decide which one it is we are using and then borrow the endings from that tense. So, when you're going from English into Latin, if you have something like the Greeks were besieging the city of Troy for 10 years, but in the 10th year, they captured it. Okay? Captured. It's not were capturing, and it's not have captured. We just said, and in the 10th year, they captured it. So, what you have to do is work out, well, of the two available tenses, imperfect and perfect, which one is more likely? And the rule is pretty simple. The imperfect tense endings, bam, bar, spat, barmus, bartis, bunt, are used to describe a continuous action in the past. They were besieging the city for 10 years, on and on and on. Okay, so if we'd said for 10 years the Greeks besieged the city, besieged, we would use the imperfect tense endings for a continuous action in the past. But in the 10th year, they captured it. Now, that is a distinct action, a completed action in the past, and for that we use the perfect tense endings, e, isti, it. Okay? So, when you're going from English into Latin, be sure to pick the appropriate set of endings when you're dealing with this simple past. If the action refers to a continuous action in the past, use bam, bar, spat. And if it's a sort of one-off completed action, then use the perfect tense endings, e, isti, it. And then if you're translating from Latin, when you see bam, bar, spat, either you're going to translate it with he was doing it, she was doing it, we were doing it, using the was and wers, or it might sound better to use a simple past, like he swam, or he ran, or he attacked, or he captured. And it's sort of down to you, whatever sounds best. Okay? Right, now, enough about that little distinction. I now want to have just a little look at what happens when, instead of writing simple Latin sentences or translating simple Latin sentences, which are very sort of self-contained. Each one is its own little thing, and it normally has a subject and a verb and an object and so on. When we start translating extended passages of Latin, at first it can be a bit spooky. I remember when I was young learning Latin, I was fine doing sentences. I could do them again and again and again. Each one had its own little meaning. And then suddenly we were given a passage of Latin, and I panicked. The wheels fell off. I didn't know what I was doing, and all my rules went out of the window. Well, you mustn't let that happen, and nor need you let that happen, because a passage of Latin is simply a group of sentences, long or short, joined together and put into a continuous passage. So you still have lots of little sentences, just translate the lots of little sentences following your golden rules. Okay? Now, in the book, we've got an exercise, a jolly little exercise called exercise 4.12, which is the first time we get an extended passage of Latin to translate. So I thought we'd just have a little go at the first paragraph of that, just to show you what I mean. It is just a set of little sentences joined together. Each one, treat it as if it was just a single sentence and you won't go wrong. Okay, so agricola fabulam narrabat, incolae Graeciae cum incolis Troiae pugnabant, Troiam non dele verunt, incolae Troiae, incolas Graeciae timebant, sed incolas Graeciae multis agitis et talis vulnerabant, and so on. Okay, so it's just, it's a passage of Latin. Well, let's look at the first sentence first. Agricola fabulam narrabat. Okay, go to the verb first, narrabat. Third person singular, he, she, or it was telling. Go and look for a noun in the nominative singular, and happily there's a nice one at the very beginning, agricola. So, agricola narrabat, the farmer was telling, and then one word left, fabulam, a story. That's in the accusative case, that is our object. Okay, the farmer was telling a story. Now we've got inverted commas, so we know we are in direct speech. This is where you might look out for vocatives, by the way, because you're talking to someone. And so we've got incolae Graeciae cum incolis Troiae pugnabant. Right, go to the verb first, pugnabant. Third person plural is they. So the chance of a vocative has disappeared because we're not talking to someone with a second person, singular or plural. So they were fighting. Who was fighting? Let's go and see if there is a nominative. Now we've got incolae Graeciae. They both look like nominative plurals to me. Cum incolis Troiae is another one that looks a bit sort of nominative pluralish. Pugnabant. So we've got to take a little bit of care over this. Now, incolae, we know is incola, means an inhabitant, goes like mensa. So incolae could well be a nominative plural, the inhabitants. So let's just sort of assume it is and run with that. We can always change our mind later if it's going pear-shaped. But incolae, the inhabitants, and then we kind of are drawn to that word Graeciae. Well, Graecia means Greece, so you can't have that in the plural, so it's not a nominative plural or a vocative plural. So we're left with its sort of genitive singular or dative singular possibilities, and somehow the inhabitants of Greece is looking pretty natural. So let's go for that. The inhabitants of Greece. Now, what were they doing? They pungnabant. They were fighting. The inhabitants of Greece were fighting. Back to where we left off. Cum incolis. Now, do you remember what we learnt last time about prepositions? When you see a preposition, bracket it off with the noun it goes with, so that you don't kind of lose where it goes. Cum incolis, with the, now cum takes the ablative, incola we've already discussed means inhabitant, so cum incolis, that's the ablative plural with the inhabitants. So you've got the inhabitants of Greece were fighting with the inhabitants, Troiae, of Troy. Okay, first sentence nailed. Troiam non deleverunt. Right, very short little sentence. Go to the verb first. Deleverunt. Now, deleo means I destroy. Goes like moneo. Deleverunt, third person plural, perfect tense. They have destroyed. Or if we're using the simple past, it would be they destroyed. Okay, now who's they? See if we've got a subject. Well, we've only got Troiam and Noun, so we don't have a nominative plural to be the subject of that verb. So it is they, now we've got Noun, so it's negative, they have not destroyed, or using the simple past, they did not destroy. They did not destroy Troy. Okay, on we go. Encolai Troiae, Incolas Graeciae timebant, said Incolas Graeciae multis sagittis et talis vulnerabant. Now, you could get a bit panicky because there's lots and lots and lots of words here, but actually, break it down carefully, you'll be fine. So, we go to our verb, and you might say, which verb? Because there are two there. We've got timebant and we've got vulnerabant. But where we've got more than one verb, go to the first verb first, and that's going to be a clause. You're going to cut off that little clause. So, Incolai Troiae, Incolas Graeciae timebant. Draw a little line there, and that's your first clause. We're going to deal with that one first. The verb is timebant, so who's doing the fearing? Well, they, third person plural, they were fearing, but we want to know, is there a noun in the nominative plural? Back we go to the beginning. We've got all these AE endings, which is a bit spooky, but, you know, we're getting the hang of this. Sometimes it sort of becomes obvious. Incolai, the inhabitants, now we know that's a nominative plural because we've already had it in the previous sentence. The inhabitants, Troiae, of Troy, so that's going well. The inhabitants of Troy. Now, what were they doing? We've got our subject, tack it into its verb. The inhabitants of Troy, timebant, were fearing. But again, if we're going to use the simple past, it'll sound more natural. The inhabitants of Troy feared. Okay, it's a continuous action in the past. They were fearing, but it sounds more natural to say they feared. The inhabitants of Troy feared. Now, who did they fear? We want an object in the accusative case. We've got incolas. Fantastic, accusative plural. So, the inhabitants of Troy feared Incolas Graeciae, the inhabitants of Greece. Okay, very nice. That's that clause dealt with. Then we come to our conjunction, said, but. And we're now going to launch into another clause. But what? Let's see what's going to happen in the next clause. So we've got Incolas Graeciae, multis sagittis et talis, okay, loads and loads of words. What do? You go to the verb, right? All the way down to vulnerabant. third person plural, they, or a noun in the nominative plural. Okay, well, is there a noun in the nominative plural? We've got inkolos, graikei. Now, graikei, AE, looks nominative plural, except that graikia means Greece, and you can't have that in the plural, so it's not nominative plural. Inkolos is definitely not nominative plural. And then you've got multis, sagitis, well, they look like datives or ablatives. And then you've got et, which is and then telis, that's another dative or ablative. Okay, so the subject is tucked into that verb vulnerabant. They were wounding. Okay, so we've got but they were wounding. Back we go, looking for our object, inkolos, lovely accusative plural. But they were wounding the inhabitants, graikei, of Greece. And then you've got these other words, multis, sagitis, et telis. Right, well, the ending is lovely and kind of recognisably dative or ablative plural. And if they were wounding the inhabitants, and it's either dative or ablative, ablative is rather nice because it means with. They were wounding them, multi-sagitis, with many arrows, et telis, and spears. Okay, that word multis shouldn't really be there. It's an adjective. And we're going to come on to adjectives quite soon. But what you notice is that it's got the same ending, the lovely ablative plural. So multi-sagitis means with many arrows. With many arrows. Et telis and spears. Okay, so there you have it. A simple little passage of Latin for translation. Just a series of sentences joined together. And no need to panic. Okay, so I hope you cope with that. Next time we are going to move on and have a little look at adjectives. And so you'll see how words like multis pop in to sentences, this time authorized rather than sneaking in unannounced. So do subscribe to this channel and hit the bell below for notifications of new videos twice a week. And we are pushing on through. See you next time.